Tennessee Life is sponsored by Next to New, an upscale consignment shop serving Knoxville. nexttoknowknox.com. And by The Flower Pot, for over 100 years, offering flowers and same-day delivery with 2 convenient Knoxville locations. knoxvilleflowerpot.com. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Coming up on Tennessee Life, old barns get a new purpose once this Tennessee man takes them down by hand.
There are many, many generations of people whose lives and livelihood depended upon this structure for their existence. And I mean, it gives me goosebumps just thinking about it.
A love for his home state and the outdoors has given Sam Venable plenty to write about and a career in making people laugh at everyday life.
I guess what you have to do is just keep your eyes and ears open and just look all around you. I mean, a lot of the stuff I write about is low-hanging fruit. It's out there, you know, and it's so easy to write about.
An organic farmer wanted to spend more time in the kitchen with her homegrown Tennessee produce. We have her story of farmer turned chef. Those stories on this edition of Tennessee Life.
Thanks for joining us for this edition of Tennessee Life. I'm Vicki Lawson. Old weather barns are just part of what makes a beautiful Tennessee landscape. Unfortunately, age has made many of these barns unsafe to actually use today. But a Tennessee man has found a way to give new life to the old rustic barns by repurposing the wood. And now little pieces of Tennessee barns are being used in creative new ways all over the country. We learn more from the founder of the Tennessee Barnwood Company.
I'm unbuilding what someone else built. And each one's done a little differently. You know, it's the history of farming and country living. My name is Ray Trotta, and I started the Tennessee Barnwood Company, LLC, in March of 2010. Well, the way I got the idea was a friend of mine lived next door to a barn that had been slowly being dismantled, I guess over maybe 10 years, but wasn't coming down. It was still there. And I had had a few corporate jobs in my history, and I decided that I really wanted to work for myself. I was aware there was some value in the wood. Turns out they had been looking for somebody to remove it for them, and that was the Turner barn in West Knoxville. That was the very first one. It was built around the 1890s, and that started this whole process. I provide the service of removing the barn in exchange for the wood. I dismantle old homes, any kind of old building, but I never know really how it's gonna go until I get into it, because each one's different. So at the time, I didn't know how I was going to do it. I didn't know where this was going to go, but I had a feeling. All I had was a feeling that this was something that I wanted to do. And I didn't know how to do it, but I trusted myself enough that I could figure out how to do it. Each one of these structures has a very distinct personality, and I wouldn't say that they're haunted, but there are many, many generations of people whose lives and livelihood depended upon this structure for their existence. And I mean, it gives me goosebumps just thinking about it, because it was an important part of daily life. Without it, you didn't have a place to put your equipment, you didn't have a place to put your animals or your supplies. It is coming to an arrangement with, an understanding, maybe is a better word, with the building, with the structure. And I always treat it with the utmost respect, kind of like hallowed ground. The safety involves working around the barn first. I mean, I can walk into one, and I'm not a structural engineer, but I would say I'm about as close as you can get to being an expert on barn structures. I do this by myself right now because I needed to learn how to do it so I wouldn't be hurt. And I didn't need the distraction of another person taking my attention away from what I was doing. And so I work outside the barn first, clearing trees and brush, and usually there's tin and barn wood that's fallen off, and there's always a reason someone wants these down. I'm collecting throughout the entire process. I would say 50% of the time I use the winch that's on the front of my truck, and 50% of the time I use a sledgehammer. I always let gravity work for me, and then you hear it creak, and I mean, it makes a loud, it'll echo in the whole valley. It's loud. But no dynamite, no explosives. If I do it the way that I prefer to do it, the structure will fall on its own footprint. It'll maybe off 5 to 8 feet. I have had a few close calls. The first barn I took down had been added onto a number of times, and it had to be pulled in sections. And I was down to the last section that had 4 6x6 beams. As I went underneath, I was attaching the chain, and somehow the weight shifted, and the roof, the corner just dropped down and hit me right square on top of the head, the hard hat, and didn't hurt a bit, but dropped me to my knees and started sliding forward. It ended up digging in about 2 feet into the ground. Potentially could have crushed me, but it stopped at this piece of limestone. When I started, I knew there was some value in the wood. I wasn't sure where the niche was, but I trusted that I could figure that out. Well, I was walking through an antique mall one day, and I saw a table that had wood that was almost identical to what I was taking down. This was the very first barn. It looked like 4 pieces of wood. It was like a 5x3 dining room table, very simple. And I looked underneath, I looked at how it was put together, and I said, I can do that. And so I embarked on learning how to build tables. And that was all I built. And that was about the first couple of years. The wholesaling of the wood came about with some folks on Long Island who were looking for wood to make frames out of, and they needed a couple thousand board feet. And that gray wood is kind of the gold of this. That's a lot of people love that patina. I never use the word tearing down. I always use the word dismantling. It's going from a structure to places all over the country. What I found is that the people that I sell wood to are much more creative. It goes on to live another life and make people happy.
Later on Tennessee Life, we talk to the founder of Organicism Farms about how her love for food has evolved from farming to cooking and catering. And next, humorist Sam Venable and his more than 4 decades career of writing for his hometown newspaper.
Sam Venable has made a career out of putting life's goofs, mishaps, and everyday observations into words that'll start your day with a laugh. After writing for his hometown newspaper for more than 4 decades, Venable has retired from the Knoxville News Sentinel. Don't worry, you'll still get to read his column a couple of days a week. His Southern roots and love for the outdoors created a perfect combination for humorous writing, along with 12 books. His talents also put him in the Tennessee Journalism Hall of Fame. Venable talked with me about his all-Vol family and why writing will always be a part of his life. Tell me a little bit about your love of outdoors. It's hard not to love the outdoors if you live in Tennessee,
in East Tennessee. I grew up in the outdoors. I was lucky to grow up in kind of a rural area of South Knox County, and I was just always outdoors.
Well, you minored in forestry and wildlife management,
Right.
I think. Then you became the outdoor editor at Knoxville News Sentinel. Tell me how that progressed.
Well, that was interesting. You're right, I was a forestry wildlife major at UT. And I ran into, I was doing just blissfully in that. I even worked one summer with the U.S. Forest Service out in Idaho. Then I ran into chemistry. And chemistry was just about to get me under. And I, honest to Pete, really kind of floundered around. I didn't know what I was going to do. And a friend of mine suggested journalism. I won't tell you what he said. He said, "You're so full of it, you can do this." And so I took a journalism course and loved it. And as a junior, I switched my major to journalism. And that's what my degree is, in journalism. And I worked for 2 other papers before I came to the News Sentinel. They hired me as the outdoors editor, and it was just a perfect blend. It was just at the time when the environmental movement was starting. This was in 1970. And it was just, for me, a perfect marriage of my love of the outdoors and my journalism background.
How did you make your way to the Knoxville News Sentinel?
It was really lucky. Journalism jobs were a lot more available back in the day. And as soon as I switched majors and got into journalism, I took a job with the old Knoxville Journal. Started as a copy boy, just a gopher. You know, you'd go get the editor a sandwich for lunch, or you'd drive out and pick up photographs or something like that, take obituaries over the phone. And within a few months, they transitioned me over to the state desk where I was writing news and that type of stuff. And I worked at the Journal until I graduated from UT. And then I got a job at the Chattanooga News Free Press doing police reporting and court reporting and that type of stuff. And I was there less than a year, and Tom Seiler called me. Tom was the sports editor of the News Sentinel. And he said, "We're going to have an opening for outdoors. Are you interested?" And I said, "Oh man, am I interested? When do I show up?"
Tell me how you became a humorist.
I grew up around funny people. And if you have any inclination for humor and you grow up in a humorous environment, it just sticks. I remember one time Louis Grizzard always said that the best thing about Southern humor writers and Southern humorists is we don't tell funny stories, we tell stories funny. And that made great sense to me. It's your delivery of it is what makes it funny. It's not just the story itself.
Did people tell you as you were growing up that you were funny or had a quick wit about you?
As I said, if you grow up in that environment, you just expected everybody's funny. And I do recall one time I was on an 8th grade trip, a bus trip, you know, we went to Nashville. And the driver had a little intercom that he could speak to the rest of the bus. And I got on that intercom one time. My father had a Spike Jones record. It was funny, full of lots of gags and all that. And I got on there and started doing that. And the people my students, my fellow students were laughing. And I can remember that rush.
You have written several books. Tell me about I'd Rather Be Ugly Than Stupid and Other Deep Thoughts.
Yeah. That title, I had a dear friend. He died in 2008, Jody McHenry. He and I grew up together, hunted and fished together all our lives and all this. Jody was a tremendously funny person. And he actually, by accident, gave me the title for 2 of my books. One was 2 or 3 Degrees Off Plum, and that was one of his statements. He talking about, he said, "Oh, he's 2 or 3 degrees off plum," and that just stuck in my head. And then the title of I'd Rather Be Ugly Than Stupid came from a time he and I had gone hunting one place. The guy had told us on the farmer, he said, "Go over to this field. That's where all the doves are flying in." Well, no, we're going over this field. Well, naturally, we're late. We're having to go back to the good field. And Jody was so mad. He was bumping along, and we're going across this field. He said, "Man, that was ugly." He said, "That was stupid. That was just stupid. Why did we do that? That was stupid." He said, "I hate to be stupid." He was really mad. And he said, "I'd rather be ugly as be stupid." And I just fell off on the floor laughing, which made him mad, you know. I said, "That's a great book title, Jode." And that's how it ended up, yeah.
Well, I've read many of your articles. I've also seen you do some stand-up, some performances when you speak at engagements. And you really get to use the Southern Appalachian dialect. As a lot of material. And I think one of your books was How to Talk, Write, and Good.
How to Talk and Write Good, yeah. That, you know, again, growing up in a kind of a rural area, you pick up a lot of that dialect, and you just hear it. It's a type of thing you can't, I guess if you were a trained linguist, you would go out and listen for it. But if you just grow up in that environment, you hear it. And I teasingly say, but yet with some truth behind it, when I was in high school and started reading Chaucer, I didn't have any trouble understanding that, because that Old English, I heard a lot of people speak that way, or at least in bits and pieces, and so I could understand it. And you can, you know, it's corn pone stuff, but you can make people laugh around here, or people who are not from here, you can make them laugh with just old Southern Appalachianisms.
You do some stand-up with a group, and did you ever see that you would be doing that, or think that you would be doing a stand-up comedy routine?
Not really. I don't think I did, because the very first, I was terrified of speaking. I remember early on in my outdoor career, I was covering an event down in Atlanta, some big game and fish thing from all these different states, and somebody just asked me would I address something the next day. I could hardly sleep. I was scared to death to get up and talk about that. Well, I did, and it worked out. Nobody threw anything at me. And I guess you just sort of evolve. And then, as I said, that time when I was in the 8th grade, I enjoyed doing it. And it's a real rush. I mean, anybody that's performed knows it is a rush to get in front of a group. And if they're receptive, and if you're delivering to them, gosh, that's fun.
You use yourself as material a lot. You are one that can embrace making light or making fun of yourself, I think, in your situations.
Well, I feel like that, when I was doing outdoors, that was one thing that really struck me. I was surrounded in an outdoor writing fraternity by people who were experts in everything. And you would read these stories, and man, they knew how to call ducks, they could call turkeys in, they were the best deer hunters, the greatest bass fishermen, and all that. And I thought, no, most people aren't. We're klutzes, you know. And the first outdoor book I did was called A Handful of Thumbs and Two Left Feet, still in print today. And it's just written about how you can be a goof in the outdoors. And I think people identify with that.
Where would life be without the bloopers? I mean, it
Sure.
would just be,
Yeah.
it'd be so
boring.
It
It
would.
would be so boring.
Do you see your Tennessee life as striking a balance between your love of outdoors and your love of writing? And do you see that as a perfect world?
As far as I'm concerned, yeah. It's great. I mean, you're in a part of the country where outdoors is so important to everybody. Since March the 5th of 1970, when I came to the News Sentinel, I've been on the longest leash you can imagine. They just said, go write. And one time it was in the narrow confines of outdoors, and now it's just whatever you want to do. How can you not love that opportunity?
So much has changed in the way that people get their information now throughout the duration, I'm sure, of your career, especially in newspaper.
Oh, yeah.
Give me a little insight to where you've seen it from the point where you started to where you are, and how do you see it evolve?
I call myself a dead tree journalist because I still work on dead trees, paper, but I don't know where it's going. I do know this: people are always going to want to read. They will read in some form, some format. Now, it might not be that tactile thing that I like, where you pick up a paper and read it. I'm old school. I still like that. It may be on a screen. I don't know. I don't know if we're going to get it on those eyeglasses where you see people looking up like that. I don't know how it's going to come, but people are always going to read.
Do you think you'll always have material to write about?
I hope so. I hope so. The day that you just, people say, do you ever have writer's block? No, you can't. You just cannot. You have days when it doesn't happen as easily as it does other days. I generally write 2 or 3 days in advance, and there are times I get up there, it's just not working, but I've always got something I can fall back on. As far as just running out of material, no. I want to keep doing the Talk is Cheap tour. I want to keep doing what little bit I can do on stage and all that. Yeah, I want to keep doing that. I cannot imagine just quitting and putting your feet up.
Well, that's truly your Tennessee life.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you'd die in 10 minutes if you did that.
Thank you so much for taking time to spend with us
thank you for
today and
having
for
me. It's been
sharing your
fun.
Tennessee life. It's truly been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
A love for farming and cooking gave a Tennessee catering business its start. The owners of Organicism Farms like to see their food every step of the way, from the roots to the plate. We took a trip to their farm in Seymour, where all the catered menus start with local, organically grown produce.
Hi, I'm Jessica Hammonds, and I am the co-owner and bug smashing specialist at Organicism Farms. The way it got started, I kind of got interested in growing food due to the fact that, well, I was raised actually where the farm is now. My grandmother purchased this land. We have 28 acres, and my family lived here. I was raised here. It was a beautiful place to grow up, and my mom always had a really large garden. We don't have farming in my family, but there was a love of gardening and canning and just always had a really good understanding of where food came from. I kind of lost touch with that for a while growing up, you know, high school, that sort of thing. You don't really think about that or care. However, when I got into college and had no money, and suddenly it occurred to me that there was food actually growing in my backyard that I could pick and eat, that was a pretty amazing realization. And ever since then, I started wanting to learn more about cooking more with the food that I had grown. Everything we grow everything organically, no chemicals, and it's really fun to be able to just go outside and grab a tomato that you've grown, that you've seen from a seed start to finish, and eat it. I worked on a small farm outside of Nashville in Goodlettsville for a while, and I learned a lot. And once I had been there for a while and the season ended, my mom pointed out that we of course have all this wonderful land sitting here fallow, and I said, hey, let's start a farm.
Well, I think, you know, we started out like a lot of organic farms the first couple of years, but as the years have progressed, we've really focused on kind of showing people the overall circle of, you know, seed to table basically, and kind of showing them why it's important, what it does for them, and how it can really positively affect their lives.
We actually had the opportunity at one point to purchase a small piece of property in Mechanicsville, which is closer to where we actually live, and it's also kind of a neat thing. It's in a fairly urban area, and we wanted to have something that would be downtown to kind of show people where food comes from. No matter where you live and how small of a space you have, you can grow a lot of food to provide for your family that then you're not going to the grocery store and spending as much money. You're eating better, healthier food, and you can really do that anywhere. So it was just a neat way to kind of show people that, sure, you can have a farm in the country, you know, but you can also do the same thing in the city as well. I started getting jealous of all the chefs I was selling to. I got into farming because of my love of cooking, and I decided what better to do than start using the food I was growing to cook for people. So within the last few years, instead of farming, I'm now catering and actually creating food with the produce that is grown here in Seymour and at my house in Knoxville as well. Started doing a few dinners, just kind of farm to table dinners, and fell in love and said, okay, how do I keep this going? And thought I'd try my hand at catering for a while. But I absolutely identify myself as a farmer. I'm not your traditional image of a farmer that you think of, and we don't necessarily do things traditionally. We kind of like to see where farming can go and see what you can do, and that being, you know, growing the mushrooms, growing in an urban plot, trying to educate people about food, to kind of show people this is how seasonality works and this is where the food came from that you're enjoying. So We almost see the farm as being an educational tool where through cooking, through the urban plot, through all these different things, we can help show people more about what food can do for you and where it comes from and how important it is. I think it's really important to be a part of, the local food movement, really trying to get people to understand where food comes from and how it's grown. To have local food is exciting. It tastes better, it's fresher, you're gonna have more nutrients, and it tastes better. So it really is important for so many reasons. Also, you're keeping money in your community, which is really important. Knoxville is an awesome place, Seymour is an awesome place, and we all need to support each other. And food is the smartest way you can possibly do that, because you're not only supporting somebody, but you're benefiting yourself.
From homegrown menus to recycled barn wood and a great Southern wit, we hope you've enjoyed this edition of Tennessee Life. I'm Vicki Lawson. See you next time.
Tennessee Life is sponsored by Next to New, an upscale consignment shop serving Knoxville, nexttonewknox.com, and by The Flower Pot, for over 100 years, offering flowers and same-day delivery with 2 convenient Knoxville locations, knoxvilleflowerpot.com.